Pastor Ed here with Daily Devotions for Tuesday, April the 23rd, 2024. Today I want to just talk a little bit more about the idea of passing the baton as a way of describing how we pass the faith on from one generation to another. And then the next 4 days, we'll spend a couple of days looking a little bit more closely at the Acts 17 reading, and then the final 2 days of the week on the 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verses 1 through 10 reading. Reminder, though, I mentioned this in the sermon if you had a chance to hear it, and if you were trying to do the live stream at the late service, we had technical difficulties. I apologize for that. Josh is working on it. I think I have a short in my mic, so I apologize for that. But I mentioned in that sermon that Crystal Hall noted that in our lectionary, our narrative lectionary, the shift from the third until the fourth week of Easter involves talking about the first passing of the tradition from the earliest Christians to that kind of next generation of Christians. And I came across a thing written by a fellow by the name of Bob Marr. He's been a coach and an entrepreneur and a businessman and everything else. He's got his own website, Coach Marr, but he's also a Christian. And he had some interesting things to say here about this whole idea. He begins by writing, "The relay race as a life metaphor arose for me recently." And then he goes on to say, "I have great memories of running relay races from elementary school through intramurals at college. It's a prime example of teamwork and camaraderie. A relay race requires full participation from every member, everyone giving it all their all for the assigned section, then passing on the baton. It's never the fastest runner or the last runner that wins the race. It's the team that works together and trusts each other. Passing the baton with confidence and care is the most crucial element." And he also goes on to say the 4x100 relay is his favorite track event because it's exciting and fast with 3 critical handoffs. And of course, over the years, if you've ever followed track, Olympic gold medals have been won or lost due to poor handoffs. At the Rio Olympics, for instance, in 2016, the USA men's 4x100 relay team was the favorite, hands down, the fastest collection of runners in the race, but their poor execution of a baton handoff cost them a medal. And Japan, despite none of their members having a sub-10 time for the 100 meters, took the silver medal. Japan's precision in the handoffs gave them the advantage over teams with faster athletes but inferior technique. A successful baton exchange, he writes, needs to be intentional and precise. It requires that both runners keep moving forward, stay within their lanes, and time the handoff appropriately. But the passing can't be too early, but also can't take too long. It's an intricate balance. The expertise in the handoff is developed over hours of practice. If we look up the phrase, passing the baton, he says it means to hand over a particular duty or responsibility. Society in general needs the next generation to be up to speed for a successful handoff without losing momentum. And the same thing, I believe, is true of the church. And he goes on to talk about that as well. Like in a relay race, when the next runner overextends and grabs for the baton, tragedy often results with dropped batons and stumbling transitions, which cost precious momentum. Hurry up and give it to me is not a smooth transition. The person passing the baton controls the handoff. And as a society, the current generation needs to let go of the baton and pass it appropriately. "I will hold on to this a little bit longer" is not a smooth transition. I talked a little bit about this in the church, and that there has to be that generational passing of the baton. There needs to be trust, he says, on both sides of the exchange, rock solid dependence created by experience. We must invest in developing the capabilities of each runner. And he goes on to say that there are many biblical parables for the passing of the baton, beginning in Genesis, for instance, with the patriarchs, Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, and then to Joseph and the 12 tribes of Israel. Later on in the Old Testament, he writes, there's the passing of kingly rule, which quite frankly didn't go all that well, he says, from Saul to David to Solomon. The most notable passing of the baton, however, was from Moses to Joshua. Moses, of course, considered one of the greatest leaders in the Old Testament. God used Moses to free the people of Israel from the chains of Egypt, led them through the wilderness toward the promised land of Canaan. However, Moses was not going to be the one to lead the people into the promised land. In Deuteronomy 3:28, God instructs Moses to commission Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, for it is he who will cross at the head of this people, and he who will give them possession of the land that you are to see. So Moses had to hand off the baton of leadership of the Israelites. He goes on to write the disciples first had to get up to speed before they could take the baton. Jesus spent 3 years preparing them to become apostles. Without his teachings and parables and mentoring and witnessing upon his death, the momentum of Jesus' ministry would have stumbled. Jesus prepared the disciples, Luke 9:1-6, as well as the foundation of the early church from Luke 10:1-12, by sending them out to represent the Christian mission prior to them accepting the baton. Every week we are sent out in this same way to pass the baton of our faith. And then he says something very interesting. Mass, the Mass, we think of the Catholic Mass, although Luther used to call it the Mass as well. I never knew this. It receives its name from the Latin phrase ite missa est, which means to send out. It's the last portion of the service, and it is the last blessing from the priest, and you're being sent out. We're being sent out to pass on the faith from one person to another, from one group to another, certainly from one generation to another. Marr goes on to say that in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul is passing on of first importance what he received as the fundamental content of Christian preaching. For 15 years, Timothy had been his companion, had accompanied him on his second and third missionary journeys. Paul mentored, trained, discipled Timothy to pass wisdom on to him. Timothy, as well as others that Paul touched, were able to maintain that momentum through the early church. He concludes by saying life requires that we pass the baton over and over. Passing the baton correctly is a critical transition. We must be intentional, focused on moving forward with momentum. There can be no grabbing or holding onto the baton. It's never individuals that win the race. It's the team that works together and trusts each other. What a wonderful, again, metaphor for our life in the church. It is all about passing the baton, one person to another, one generation to the next. Well, we're going to say more about those two readings in the next 4 days. So hope you have a great day today, and we'll see you again tomorrow. Until then, take care. Bye.